it would be a monumental change for the US Constitution. The whole idea of the Statue of Liberty is, once you make it to these shores, if you are born on these shores, you are American.
You judge Trump not by what he says, but what he does.
The 14th Amendment, is he actually going to do that?
How it is executed is still anyone's guess.
Before you watch today's episode, we want to remind you that tickets are on sale for the newsagent's live shows with HSBC UK. We're kicking off our tour at Birmingham Symphony Hall on February the 17th. Then we're off to the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester, that's on February the 24th. And finally to Usher Hall in Edinburgh on March the 11th. Head over to Global Player to get your tickets for any of those dates. The link will be in the description below. We're really excited to see you there.
Let me ask you, sir, as you think about your inauguration, I remember your first inaugural address, you talked about American carnage. Have you thought about your message for your second inaugural address?
I have.
Can you give us a preview?
We're going to have a message that will make you happy, unity. It's going to be a message of unity. And
this was Trump's first sit-down interview with NBC since he won a month ago. And what you're going to hear over the course of some of the clips that we'll bring you today is a very different sounding Trump, a man who has been slightly reined in from the madness of the language that was there 8 years ago, a man who sounds like he's had a go at governing already and knows what he's going to do this time.
And it sounds like, maybe we're wrong, that Trump 2.0 is going to be a rather dialed back version of what went before. He says retribution will be through success. Unity, success, it all feels rather different. Welcome to the Newsagents USA.
The Newsagents USA.
It's John.
It's Emily. And a little later, we're going to be speaking to Nellie Bowles, who has written The Morning After the Revolution, which in essence prefigures the wrong turns that she thinks the Democrats took as far back as 2020, which led to ultimately them losing the 2024 election.
But let's start with that Trump interview on Meet the Press and what it says about direction of travel of Donald Trump and the way this presidency is going to be so different from the Biden presidency, because the endless complaint about Joe Biden was that he was never communicating with anybody. He would stay shy of the cameras. And that was an accusation that was levelled at Kamala Harris as well during her campaign, that she was doing next to nothing in terms of media scrutiny. Donald Trump goes on Meet the Press, which is mainstream. It's not Fox. It's not Newsmax. It's not a One American News Network. This is mainstream. And he subjected himself to an hour of questions with Kristen Welker. And to be honest, a lot of it, you thought, this is rather different from maybe the Donald Trump that we got used to in the first term.
It's so difficult to know, isn't it? Because we've seen so many iterations of Donald Trump. But I have to say I agree with you. I watched the interview go out on Sunday night and I thought he responded to the questions. I mean, it wasn't particularly hard-hitting. It definitely wasn't a gotcha interview. But he managed to sort of sound pretty rational, sound pretty sensible. He's pretty hardline on some of his policies. We'll get onto those in a moment. But essentially, he has woven a way which sticks to an interview format. And he didn't go off into sort of craziness, and he didn't go off into what he used to call the weave. And he does actually address things like unity, things like people who didn't vote for him, bringing a country together in a way that if you were watching as an American sort of voter, you'd think, OK, this guy does know what he's doing. He has got a plan. Now, Kristen Welker asked him about the incoming director of the FBI, Kash Patel, and what we've heard from Trump in the past is his desire to see his enemies locked up. She just put it to him straight.
Cheney was behind it, and so was Benny Thompson and everybody on that committee. For what they did, honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
For what they did.
Everyone on the committee, you think?
I think everybody anybody that voted in favor.
Are you going to direct your FBI director and your attorney general to send them to jail?
No, not at all. I think that they'll have to look at that, but I'm going to focus on drill bait.
That was about the people who'd been involved in the January the 6th inquiry. And she's basically asking whether all those now count as enemies of the people? Is he going to lock them up? What did you think he actually said there?
So I don't think he was saying lock them up. I think he thinks that would be just an enormous distraction, suck up a huge amount of oxygen of his administration and time. But what he wanted to do was to show his base that he still believes that stuff. He still believes that Liz Cheney and all the others that were on that committee are rotten to the core, and that, you know, he would like to see them locked up. But is he going to do it? Is he going to encourage Kash Patel to do it? I don't think he is. There was something else he said, which I thought was so interesting, which again is very, very different from Donald Trump 1.0, which was, he said, I'm really looking to make our country successful. I'm not looking to go back into the past. I'm looking to make our country successful. Retribution will be through success. In other words, I will have my revenge on the Democrats by being more successful than they were when they were running this country. And that is what I want to see as your president. And I thought, you know what? It's not a bad message to have.
One of the ways that he wants to find that success is through deportation of immigrants. Mass deportation, that's his slogan. I remember seeing it at
and it
the
was popular
RNC.
with Democrats as well.
Well, it's an extraordinary number that he's got in mind, somewhere between 11 and 15 million. And what he said in this interview was that he would end birthright citizenship on day one. Let's just have a listen.
Let me ask you about some of your other promises on this topic. You've promised to end birthright citizenship on day one. Is that still your plan?
Yeah, absolutely.
The 14th Amendment, though, says that, quote, all persons born in the United States are citizens. Can you get around the 14th Amendment with an executive action?
We're going to have to get a change. We'll maybe have to go back to the people, but we have to end it. We're the only country that has it.
Through an executive action?
You know, we're the only country that has it. Do you know, if somebody sets a foot, just a foot, 1 foot, you don't need two, on our land, congratulations, you are now a citizen of the United States of America. Yes, we're going to end that because it's ridiculous.
Through executive action?
So what she's asking is, how do you change the Constitution, the 14th Amendment? Is he actually going to do that? Because he's probably not going to get Congress to sign that off. Congress is the kind of smart, grown-up way of doing it. Is he going to do it through an executive action, i.e. the action that solely a president can take to push something through? And I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It would be a monumental change for the US Constitution. The whole idea of the Statue of Liberty is, you know, once you make it to these shores, if you are born on these shores, you are American. He's like, we're done with that.
The complicating part of this, in his desire to deport millions of illegal immigrants, is, of course, yeah, fine, they're illegal immigrants. But the children who may be 5, 7, 9, 11, 14 years old were born in America. They've got passports. Do you deport them? You can't deport people who've got US passports. They're legitimately there.
Well, his spokesman's already said it's up to parents to decide. You can take them with you, or you can leave them here. But they're going to be hardline.
Yeah, but then you've got a massive family separation policy,
which he's done before.
But does he want to go through that again? I think with so much to do with Donald Trump, you know, the detail is not yet worked out. They know what the direction of travel is, and the direction of travel is south of the border. The direction of travel is a lot of people, you are going south and you're getting out of the country. But how it is executed is still anyone's guess. And that's why I think you judge Trump not by what he says, but what he does. And we will come back to this, I am sure, in the coming months. Just like, I mean, you know, he threw out another policy this week where he said anyone with $1 billion who wants to set up a company in the US, we will cut all the red tape, regulatory kind of obstacles, and you can just come and do it. And you think,
drill, baby, drill. I mean, you heard that, you know, he wants to encourage anything that will make the economy grow. I don't know that that's that unusual. I mean, I'm thinking of like the golden visa schemes that places like Cyprus used to have. Yeah. Welcoming in Russians, welcoming in anyone who wants to spend money there. Yeah.
That do offer
you can get a passport or you can get what you want. But we should talk maybe about the really defining big story of the week, which has been the fall of Assad in Syria. And what this might mean for one of Trump's picks, because Tulsi Gabbard, who has often been sort of seen as, kindly put, an insider to the Putin regime, an insider to the Bashar al-Assad regime, very sympathetic to two sort of rogue regimes.
She said Bashar al-Assad is not our enemy. I mean, absolutely clearly, even though he was kind of launching chemical weapon attacks against his own people.
And she is his pick to be
She's
head
Director
of
of National Intelligence, which
Right.
kind of which runs the other intelligence agencies in the US. She was a Democrat congresswoman. She was a Democrat congresswoman for Hawaii, even ran for the presidential nomination back in the day, a few years ago, against Joe Biden when he was running for it.
Which is the kind of Democrat that Trump adores. Anyone who leaves one side and comes onto his side is a double win, right?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't require much kind of head scratching to work out that one question that reporters might want to ask of her now is, what does she think of the downfall of Bashar al-Assad? She seems strangely unwilling to engage.
I want to address the issue that's in the headlines right now. I stand in full support and wholeheartedly agree with the statements that President Trump has made over these last few days with regards to the developments in Syria. My own views and experiences have been shaped by my multiple deployments and seeing firsthand the cost of war and the threat of Islamist terrorism. It's one of the many reasons why I appreciate President Trump's leadership and his election, where he is fully committed, as he has said over and over, to bringing about an end to wars, demonstrating peace through strength, and putting the national security interests and the safety, security, and freedom of the American people first and foremost.
Do you regret your meeting in Syria, Congressman? What about your relationship with Assad?
What about your relationship with Assad? And with that, she was gone. She talked in generalities. I agree with everything that Donald Trump has said, but on answering questions about what she feels about Russia, what she feels about Bashar al-Assad, she didn't have much to say.
I mean, also, she talked about her multiple deployments. She is woefully underqualified for that job. She has been deployed, but never in intelligence capacity. And I think that is something else that people are starting to look at is, you know, you can pick whatever type of crazy you want for these jobs, but please make sure that they have some experience that would actually make them the right person for the job.
But Pete Hegseth, who is his choice to be Defence Secretary, may have been a soldier for a few years, but he's going to be running $1 trillion budget. He hasn't got any kind of... What is the strategic commitments of the nuclear versus conventional kind of, you know, balance in terms of US forces around the globe? I mean, he's been a grunt on a front line, and I don't take, you know, kudos to him for having done that. But the idea that he's qualified, yet the indications now are that after the fall of Matt Gaetz, Trump is digging in, and it looks like those nominations are getting places, and that Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth and others will get confirmation when it comes to it from the Senate.
Pete Hegseth, who has said straight up he doesn't want women involved in combat in the military, who nevertheless made his own mother go on Fox and Friends to defend him.
See, irony is alive and well, and living in the United States of America. We'll be back after the break.
So shortly after we got back from Washington, I happened to pick up this book, which I bought months ago and only just started reading, and it's called The Morning After the Revolution, Dispatches from the Wrong Side of History. It's by Nellie Bowles, who was formerly with the New York Times, and she basically sets out, in a very short, about 10 chapters, what was going on to fringe elements of the Democratic Party, the super ultra progressives, that no one really understood properly at the time. We were talking about Antifa. For British heads, that just means anti-fascists. And she takes you into those protests. She takes you into the George Floyd riot. She takes you into the homeless camps following that. And it's not always particularly savoury. And it's not always flattering to the Democrats.
What she's done is pick on an element of the radical part of the Democratic Party and point up absurdity, and how absurdity then sort of became mainstream and became part of who the Democratic Party are, what its identity is, how it presented itself to the American people in November. This was written before November.
Yeah.
But so much of the post-mortem that is taking place now on why the Dems lost can be found in the pages of that book, which went to print months and months before the presidential election.
Well, Nellie Bowles now runs a new news organisation called the Free Press. She joins us now from New York. So, Nellie, just take us through what made you write it, or how you came to be writing this book in the first place.
Yeah, so I was a reporter at the New York Times. I was a features reporter, traveling around doing feature stories about different things that interested me. And then around 2020, during the kind of upheavals that were happening in America, around the world, all of a sudden, what you were allowed to be curious about as a reporter started to get really constrained. And it started to get harder and harder to do the interesting stories that were happening in the world and to do them with your eyes open and to do them honestly. And what I mean by that is I started getting a lot of kind of social pressure and editor pressure, not to report on stuff like the 2020 riots and small businesses and the impact. And it started to become in mainstream newsrooms that you weren't supposed to be a curious reporter. You were supposed to be an ideologue. And there was kind of a purification that happened where it was like anyone who wasn't exactly in lockstep was ousted and was like really bad. And I think we saw that now with this election, with how the Democrats approached the election, how the Democrats tried and failed to build a coalition. It's a party that's gone through a lot of what I'm thinking of more recently is like purification rites, and kind of like finding dissidents, finding anyone who's a little bit different or a little curious about something that we don't want to talk about right now, and making sure they're kicked out.
But Nellie, it sounds like you've written the post-mortem of the Democrat Party's election defeat 6 months before the election, in some ways, because this is where the narrative is now in so many places, that the Democratic Party was too woke, that you can't talk about white privilege without alienating a lot of people, defund the police is maybe not such an election-winning slogan for an awful lot of people.
I mean, listen, the mainstream Democrats aren't like this. Just like the mainstream of a place like the New York Times or of CNN or whatever isn't totally crazy. It's that a radical fringe has managed very effectively to take control. And within the Democrats, a small fringe of activists and nonprofits have managed to kind of take control of the narrative and present things that aren't true. So, like in the case of Kamala's campaign, they you had nonprofits saying that they represented the voice of Latino Americans, Latinx Americans, Latinx, or Asian Americans. And you had these nonprofit leaders saying, we represent these people and they want XYZ radical leftist politics. And it turns out that that wasn't true at all. It wasn't true in any way, that actually Latinos and Asian American voters were very much moderate Democrats, and that the groups supposedly representing them don't represent them at all. And I think you have kind of a fringe leftist movement that has managed to take over the larger movement of liberalism of Democrats, and confuse it and win the day. And it won the day with the Kamala campaign, basically. And Kamala tried at the end to walk it back. She had like Liz Cheney and a few moderates come on with her. She tried to sort of like not talk about her more radical positions. But those were the positions she had, and she never backtracked on any of them. And so, yeah, I think this movement is absolutely why the Democrats lost ground with people who were historically happy Democrats.
In the book, you take us through different issues, and one of the things you do is you attend an anti-racism course, The Toxic Trends of Whiteness. And I'm just going to give our listeners a little flavour of some of what you write. Before we can abolish our whiteness, we need to feel our white skin. We need to activate it. Our facilitator is there to help get things started. We tap gently and lightly on our skin, on our chests, our hips, our feet, our backs, everywhere we can reach. We are activating containment. We are activating our vessel. We are activating our flesh. I mean, without you spelling it out, you clearly found a lot of the stuff you were doing utterly ridiculous, utterly puerile, and perhaps counterproductive. I'm wondering, what happens now if people say there is going to be a backlash? There is going to be inevitably a backlash towards questions over racial reckoning, questions over sort of racial progress, and try and sort of put those at your feet.
I think that there's, of course, a world where we have a backlash that's terrible, and that goes far right, and that is rageful. There's also a world where people start to say, okay, some of this stuff got funny. Some of this stuff got a little extreme. Like, I'm from San Francisco, and I I lived there all my adult life. Now, to run the Free Press, we moved to New York, but um, I have seen in San Francisco, which is like the lefty city, and it kind of is a few years ago where the Democrat Party is right now, actually. San Francisco over the last couple years has gone through a total reformation where the moderates of the city have risen up and they've said, enough is enough. This is crazy. They've started to laugh at some of the stuff that's a little more absurd, like drum circles where you feel your white skin and talk about the problems they're in. Um, and I think that San Francisco, for me, is a very hopeful model. There's a chapter in the book all about it because it represents a revolution towards moderate politics, but it's not a disavowal of the values of being liberal. It's not a disavowal of empathy for the homeless or empathy. It's just saying, let's actually look at evidence and like, let's not do the crazy stuff that has no evidence. I mean, tangibly, what you saw in San Francisco was the district attorney was recalled. The mayor was just ousted. The whole school board was, or half the school board was recalled. So basically, the whole city had a total flip. And now all the moderate, I would call them normal Democrats are running the show. And these are still San Francisco Democrats. They're still lefty by any means, but they're within the realm of like reasonable conversation now.
I would imagine that you were hated for writing this book because the one thing you cannot do if you are of that fringe is laugh at yourself. There is a sort of enormous earnestness that I've always found about these people who are sort of ideologically pure, whether it be on race or sexuality or trans issues or whatever it happens to be. You know, you don't laugh at yourself, and you have
not.
And you have kind of arched an eyebrow and kind of raised a smile. Were you loathed for it? I mean, because that was kind of like, you know, you if you were in Britain, you'd say you were taking the mickey, you were taking the piss, you were having a laugh at their expense.
I think it's not my fault that so much of what's been going on in the last few years in progressive politics is very funny. So much of it is like Latinx is inherently funny, right? It's a term that was made by progressive white people that Latinos or Hispanic folks absolutely hate. And so it's very, very funny that you have it constantly being used and applied to these people who keep in every survey, in every effort that they can make, they're saying, please stop. And people continue to like, that's objectively funny, right? I think approaching all this stuff with a little humor. I mean, now I write a humor column every week and I do sort of a summary of the news and I try to make it a little funny. And it goes out every Friday. I call it TGIF. Everyone should read it. But for me, that's been the only approach that works. And especially when I was sort of within it and very much confused by the way I was being ousted, humor was the only way I could survive without going crazy. So, otherwise, I would have gotten really angry about the situation.
I mean, the next question really is, if the Democrats are now feeling they weren't well served by the sort of the loony stuff or the fringe stuff, what you've described on the sort of the far reaches of the left, what do they do now to try and actually gain political ground? Because they're back in the middle against somebody when the whole country has pretty much shifted to the right or feels as if it's shifted to the right or culturally shifted to the right. So do the Democrats lean into that now? What do they do?
If they want to win, I think they have to. But I just read somewhere that they started that the DNC had a meeting and it began with a land acknowledgement just even now. So
what do you mean a land acknowledgement?
Explain. So this is about indigenous
land
rights.
Acknowledgement is when you talk about how we're all sitting on colonized land and it's been stolen and we stand on the blood of Native Americans, as though any one group owns land and as though the Native Americans before us were like a stable layer that wasn't also warring and colonizing each other, but whatever. It's just one of those kind of
So you mean nothing's been learned? That's what you're saying. Nothing's been learned.
Yeah, I don't think, from what I've seen, there hasn't been a lot learned, and there's really defensiveness from the Kamala folks that actually she should have gone further left. Actually, the efforts towards getting moderates during her campaign was part of the problem, and she should have gone more left. So I don't know if it's been learned, but
Well, did you think that the Liz Cheney stuff was good or bad? I mean, that
it was good. I mean, they were trying, but I don't know how appealing Liz Cheney is to moderate or conservative voters.
I thought the most powerful advert during the campaign that Trump played again and again and again through college football games on Saturday, through NFL games on Sunday, was Kamala supports them, President Trump supports you. Now, Kamala Harris hadn't talked about trans issues at all during the campaign, yet it was hung round her neck by the Trump campaign team. So is there anything that the Democrats can do?
She didn't in the campaign talk about trans issues, but her opinion on a lot of issues was known and she didn't walk it back. And so you can't just tell people ignore that right now because I'm not talking about it. It matters. And I think she could have definitely made statements that indicated non-radicalness. I think she, on any number of issues, she could have laid out how she is different from that part of her base. And I mean, she never even made a statement saying she was different from Biden on any issue, which I get it is hard because he's your boss in the moment. It's a weird dynamic. And she was kind of in an impossible situation with that. But she could have tried a little bit. She could have laid out some things where she is separate from the far left. And she wasn't willing to because I don't think she wanted to. I don't think her campaign staff wanted her to. I think they probably all would have resigned en masse if she'd tried to make any statement about, let's say, pediatric gender transitions and said, oh, I actually don't think under 18s should be given whatever hormones. Or if she'd said something like that, I think it would have been more of an internal headache than we can imagine.
Nellie, can I ask you this? Are you still a Democrat? Are you a liberal? How would you self-describe?
I would describe, I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm a writer, so it's my politics are chaos, but I consider myself liberal and moderate Dem to centrist, probably somewhere in that spectrum.
Is there a candidate that you think speaks for you?
I don't know. On the national stage, I'm so lame with this. My mind is just in San Francisco local politics, California dynamics. I like New York's mayor. I like Eric Adams. I know he's a little corrupt. He's in trouble for he expedited some Turkish
plane tickets,
embassy permits or something, and got a free flight on Turkish Air. Yeah. So he's in a little bit of trouble for that for obvious reasons.
But could you vote for a Republican? I mean, you've got presumably.
Yeah, it depends on the candidate. Yeah, for sure, 100%. It depends on the candidate. I love Nikki Haley.
I mean, Nellie, I suppose the other person is Obama, because hasn't he delivered a similar message? I was at the Democrat convention in Chicago in August, and he was standing up saying, people, you can't judge people by purity standards. People will have funny views. We've got to be more tolerant. I mean, in some ways, he's making a similar argument to you, maybe with not as much humour, but in a similar kind of vein.
Yeah. I think he was trying, at least publicly, to blow the whistle on this stuff. And he was definitely saying some of the right stuff. I think the Dems need a new era. And it's been a little bit the Obama era for a long time. I don't know about Obama's influence, though, whether it's a good one or a bad one on the Dems right now.
Really interesting to hear from you. Nellie Bowles, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
New Trump fragrances are here. They make a great Christmas present. I've named them Fight, Fight, Fight because they represent winning. We all want to be winning. We have to win as a nation. We want to win as a family. This fragrance is all about strength and success and confidence for men and for women. Get yourself a bottle and don't forget to grab one for your loved ones too. They'll thank you and they'll even smell good. Enjoy, have fun. Keep on winning, and Merry Christmas.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you sell a bottle of perfume if you are the incoming president of the United States. Can you do better?
Well, my only bit of questioning of the marketing there, and I defer to Donald Trump with his expertise when it comes to marketing things. They'll even smell good. I mean, isn't that the point of the scent?
That was
if you're
joke.
buying perfume.
That was a joke. But it's called the Fight, Fight, Fight perfume. And if you were selling me a hoodie of the Newsagents USA randomly,
Yeah.
What would you call our hoodies?
Well, if you've eaten too much Christmas pudding, tight. But here it is. The Newsagents USA hoodie is available now. If you've got a last-minute stocking filler, if you've got a secret Santa, I don't think I'm as good as Donald Trump.
Yeah, but you
and
can
you'll
put
even smell good.
Yeah, put your loved ones in it. They will even smell good in our hoodie. And they are available on the Newsagents store. And you can find the details of that in the episode
notes. Yes, notes. That was the word you were clutching for. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Doesn't roll off the tongue, does it? Not quite like Trump.
The Newsagents USA.